Jeff from Two Hacks Garage. Well, it's been a busy couple weeks at Jimmy's shop. What we've been doing is preparing this 388 cubic inch small block Chevy for my friend Todd's 1980 Z28 Camaro to get this thing all ready to break in on this run stand. It is a custom run stand that we built, and right now he is actually working on a couple items on this to actually make this whole thing function like it would normally in a car. In the last video, what you did see us do is we added the fuel pump. Now that fuel pump is going to provide fuel up into the carburetor, down into the cylinders to make an explosion, to make that awesome noise we all like to hear called horsepower. But in order to do that, well, you have to have a distributor. And seeing this as a brand new engine, there is a series of steps that you do need to take to make this work right and get all of the distributor set in there correctly, wired up correctly, so when you go to start this up, it fires, it runs right, and creates that spark. The unit that we are using, well, this actually came from Holley's website. It's an MSD Street Fire Series HEI. It provides more than ample amount of spark for this engine. And guys, I tell you what, one thing I do like about this is it's this billet design, a nice, sturdy, heavy-duty cap on this, and overall, it's a really good quality unit. It does come with all the instructions, installation hardware, everything you need to do, which we will go over here in a few minutes. But you know what? We're going to go ahead and we're going to get started on getting the distributor dropped in this. And so when it's time, we have the spark, we have the fuel, we'll have the fire, we'll be able to make that noise we all like. See you in a few. All right, so the first step of this process is you do want to find top dead center on this. I know there's marks on all of this that you have, but one quick, easy way that you can find top dead center is with the spark plugs out, which we do have out. You place your thumb, if you can see that, that is the #1 spark plug hole. You place your thumb over that, and what you're going to do is you're going to rotate the engine over until you feel pressure start building up.
That's good, because you pass.
So I feel pressure building up, right? So what that's doing, it's a compression stroke. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out and you're going to hear it. Ready? Listen for the air rushing out. That little bit of thump, that's compression building up. So at top dead center, so what you do is you keep turning it, and our timing mark is actually right here. It's non-conventional small block Chevy the old school way. This is a new Holley cover. So what I'm doing is I'm rotating this until you see this line up with a 0 degree mark. So I'm right there. So now what you want to do is you want to go 10 degrees before top dead center. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to back that. I'm going to keep going. All right, so what I'm doing is I'm going to put it at 10 degrees before top dead center. So you got your 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and so on. So I'm going to line up the timing tab mark with 10 degrees.
30 and 40 degrees is great for nitro.
Yes, it is. So right about there is 10 degrees before top dead center. So that's the first step of this process. See you in a few. All right, so what the next step that you're going to do is what you need to make sure of is your firing order. On these Chevys, it's actually really, really simple because what we're going to do is we're going to end up marking the cap, and you just need to know your firing order. The way we're going to do this is going to be off of cylinder 1, which is the first cylinder, front of the block, driver's side on a small block Chevy. Mind you, what you need to do is you need to go online, if you don't know, and find your firing order. So what you have on a small block Chevy is 1, 3, 5, 7, and then you go 2, 4, 6, 8. So we're going to go off of number 1. Now the second step of this is actually what I call, kind of simple, but what you're going to need to know is where you're going to place your distributor cap in rotation with number 1. Because you're going to mark one of these number 1, and it's got a point along with the rotor to the number 1 cylinder. I've already pre-marked this, but what you can do, what you can do is you can actually set it in here, not all the way because it won't drop in all the way yet. And all I'm doing is setting it in there. Your vacuum advance is always going to be on the passenger side because the passenger side vacuum advance hose is going to hook up to the carburetor over here, which we'll go here in a minute. So what I'm going to do here then after that is what you want to do is you're going to want to choose one of these. It really doesn't matter, but we're actually going to go the Chevy method, and you're going to point one to number one as much as you can. So if you look here in a line, I want to get something as close as I can pointing to the number one. And you're going to do the same thing with the rotor, and I'll show you that here in a second. Now, mind you, this does spin clockwise in a small block Chevy. So, you know what, guys? With that, I'm going to show you something. Actually, it's kind of a cool little trick what you can do.
You gotta pull this off. Can't get the cap off. Let's take this off.
So what we're going to do is we're going to actually take the cap off, and I'm going to show you something what I did to make this a whole lot easier. So these caps have little tabs that hold it into place, and there's 4 of them. And this is also where you'll need to know your firing order on your cap, and you can find that online.
1-843-657-2.
So what I did was I already took the cap, and I aligned on the cap where I'm going to have number one, as you can see right there with that mark, and I marked it on the actual distributor itself right here. So that's actually marked in correlation with this. That's what's got to point to number one. And then from there, I went online and I found the firing order that's supposed to be on these caps. So it's 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, 7, 2, 1. So there, I know the firing order based upon my cap. This is going to make it a whole lot easier when I go to put these plugs on here, knowing now what the firing order is on the small block Chevy. So the next step, what you got to do is not only does the cap and rotor have to face number one, your rotor here has to face along with this tab right here to number one.
Roll it over a little so it'll drop down.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually move the, I'm going to rotate the crank over so we can get everything in alignment. So the whole thing is you want that mark on the cap for number one in correlation with on your distributor and the rotor all facing to the number one cylinder. So I'm going to go ahead and crank this over, and Jimmy's going to try to get it down because most of the time the base of that distributor is not going to line up in the shaft there. But before we actually install this, I'm going to show you a crucial step based upon MSD's instructions to break in a distributor shaft. Okay.
Now it's in alignment with the oil. Back it up.
It's in alignment, and what we're going to do is we're going to back it back up to that 10 spot.
Go past it and then bring it back to it.
We're going to go back to 0, top dead.
What that does, it takes out any slack in the timing chain.
So I'm going to go back to 10 right there.
Okay, now.
Okay, so now what we need to do is we actually have to put, there's a special assembly lube that needs to go on the gear of the distributor itself. And I'm going to explain that right now and the reason why that's important. This is actually per instructions from MSD. And MSD does provide everything that you need to be able to do that. Let me show you this real quick. And this was a tag that is actually on the distributor itself. So, hey, Jimmy, can you pull that distributor out real quick?
Okay, but before I do that, I want to say one thing, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Seeing as we put the distributor in at 10 degrees on the crank, TDC. So basically, you line this up with our black line. I hope you can see it right there. That should be TDC. It should be 10 degrees for top dead center. So, seeing this distributor turns clockwise, if you need to retard the distributor, you turn the base of the distributor clockwise to retard the timing. This is after it's up and running. But if you need to advance it, you turn it counterclockwise because that brings the spark plug wire up before the rotor hits it and advances your timing. So with it all being said and done, just make sure that you have enough movement here for the vacuum advance. so it doesn't hinder or get in, anything hinders it and gets in the way.
So let me show you that real quick. So you see the rotor point along with that line and our distributor cap. That all needs to be in alignment. See how there's that line with number 1 and then on the distributor and then your rotor. All of that has to line up facing as close as you can to number 1.
There's also a notch in the distributor and there's a notch in the cap. So be sure when you put the cap back on, it drops notch, notch.
Yep, and that's going to lock it into place.
That way you know it can't move and it's in alignment for the hold downs.
So now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you what we were just talking about on the distributor gear break-in.
Want this back out?
Yeah, go ahead and pull that out. So this is a crucial step that some people overlook, and we're going to have to add it. But if you look here, distributor gear break-in procedure. Failure to observe the following precautions can cause premature failure of the distributor gear and subsequent engine damage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that up there so you can see it. But basically it talks about it needs a thorough coating of supplied lube or a zinc-based moly, which we do have right here that MSD supplies. And I'm going to hand that to Jimmy. I'm going to open that here in a second. It says no synthetic oil should be used for gear break-in period. After the break-in period, any suitable oil may be used. Use a standard 30 or 40 weight multi-viscosity oil such as 10W30 or 2050. We use driven oils, which is good. If equipped, the oil filter bypass should be eliminated. We did that with the Canton Racing product. On highly modified engines that have oil pressure over 70 psi, which this one will have, the gear should be broken with a racing grade mineral oil, which the driven oil that we're using has that. So that is just a crucial step I wanted to show you in this. But real quick, guys, seeing that we do have the distributor itself out, this is a perfect time to put in our break-in oil. It's going to go down evenly. Everything on the top end of this is actually already been lubricated quite well by Jimmy and I. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a funnel in here just like that. And we're going to dump in the 6 quarts of driven BR40 conventional 10W40 break-in motor oil. It's got the ZDDP zinc in there, everything we need for this, chemically seals pistons, rings, protects bearings and journals. We also did use the driven moly on a lot of the assembly part of this, but this is a mineral-based oil break-in, conventional break-in motor oil, so we're going to be good to go. So we know what we're going to do real quick, guys. We're going to go ahead and put this in. See you in a minute. All right, seeing that this is a fresh engine we're going to fire. This isn't exactly part of the distributor break-in period or drop-in period install, whatever you want to call it. Sorry, lost for words today. I went ahead and put the oil in here. Everything's lubed up top. But I'm going to have Jimmy explain to what we're going to do next. It's a priming process of the engine.
Well, seeing everything's new, and I put some of that lube, the same thing as I used on the rod and main bearings.
So if you want to see the rod here.
And that lube helped lube the gears and the oil pump, and then I squirted a little bit of regular motor oil in the oil pump too. So you really don't want to start the engine bone dry. Even though there's oil in it, technically it's not bone dry, but nothing's been circulated through the oil galleys yet. And what this is a primer tool, and this little tab here goes into the slot on the oil pump. And seeing this is dry, you just put a little oil on it because it is going to be turning. You just stick it down the block, down the engine. You can feel it when it drops into the oil pump. There it is. It dropped into the oil pump. Now, I got to get my cordless drill, which is over here.
And while he does that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch the oil pressure gauge.
And on our test stand, we happen to have clear oil pressure lines, so we can actually see the oil move through it. There we go. What do you got?
70 pounds.
70 pounds?
Yep.
Well, I'm going to run it a little more, and the reason being, it's going to fill up the oil filter, and I want to make sure it gets all the air out of the oil filter.
So yeah, that's what he's doing, is he's priming everything up.
I'm done. Battery's dead.
So
But it is primed.
it is primed now, and basically what that ended up doing was as he spun that, I was watching the oil pressure gauge on the run stand, and it was at 70 pounds. And what he's doing there, what it's doing is circulating engine through all the passages. Even though we had everything lubricated with moly, assembly lube, it pushed oil through everything, and it filled the oil filter down below. So that is one step that we took additionally while putting in the distributor. That actually does help out. And now everything's primed.
Put that back here.
So, real quick, I'm going to move this over a little bit. There you go.
Sorry for the shaky camera, but it's a shame to make a mess out of a brand new engine, because you got brand new everything here. Everything's nice and squeaky clean. Best thing to do is just grab just an old junk rag, as you've seen me transfer it out of the engine to the rag real quick so you didn't drip oil all over everything and make a mess. Just wipe it off. If you really want to be a clean freak, I guess you could wash it in the parts washer tank, but a little oil on the surface never hurts anything, because it keeps it from rusting when you put it back in the toolbox. And it may be months, maybe years before you use it again, but not around here. Now, since we have not rotated the engine any, be sure that you have the gasket on the bottom of the distributor. That helps so oil doesn't come up out of the engine. And it also does one other thing. It also helps keep that little bit of spacing right there. The thickness of that gasket would change.
So real quick, I should pop that out real quick, Jamie.
Yeah, we got to put that on it.
Real quick, and it did have some moly lube already on it. If you look here, actually right here, yeah, about right here, Jimmy. So if you look here, it's got some on there, but what I'm going to do is, so Jimmy's hands are clean. This is where it comes in handy. Usually it's Jimmy getting dirty and me doing it, but it's the opposite today. So I'm going to take some of the moly lube that this comes with, and what you do is you squeeze it on the distributor gear here.
He likes my one-liners. So it's Friday. He has to get dirty at least one day a week.
Exactly. I had a really interesting day, which Jimmy and I have been talking about off camera. That's probably
we can't do that now.
yeah, probably not appropriate. It deals with some school stuff, but you just rub that in there, and this is gonna help it during its break-in period. I know it sounds weird with a distributor having an actual break-in period, but you know what?
Well, actually, it's not the distributor. You're breaking the gear.
Yeah, you're breaking the gear.
It's the same. It's steel against steel, and it's basically the same way as the lifters. They have to be broke in, and actually, what that's really called, but the quick term and easy term is break in. But what it really is, it's work hardening. They're already hard. They're not soft, but it's also work hardening the lifters, metal to metal, called work hardening.
That's all I came with there.
And then, of course, as the engine runs, the camshaft's covered with oil anyhow because of splash and drain back. And it's all going to get washed off of there, but this is just the initial part. So nothing starts dry, nothing galds. And it takes, how long is it for the cam?
20 minutes.
20 minutes for the
RPM.
cam at 2200 RPM. You do not have to do that with a roller cam, and only a flat tappet cam.
Let me get Jimmy a rag since I got him filthy.
Yeah, see, he did get me filthy.
For once, Jimmy's getting dirty, and I'm the one
Again.
staying somewhat clean. All right, so now that the distributor gear is properly lubricated with the supplied lubrication, Jimmy's going to go in there and he's going to drop that distributor back down in there. Now watch in this area here. All he's doing is lining it up as best as he can, and I think...
One thing first. We'll be back in a moment.
All right, so now what Jimmy's going to do is he's going to drop this back down in place. And number one, should maybe a little bit more this way, Jimmy.
Yep.
Yep. And all he's going to do is he's going to get it down.
I'll see right there. As you noticed, as I pushed it down, the rotor turned. That's because of the helical cut gear on the cam and the distributor. Now, maybe one more. I'll try one more. I might be going too far, but I'll try one.
There we go. So that one dropped down.
Okay, now, I still have the mark and the rotor's in alignment.
So what I'm going to do real quick.
So I'm at 10 degrees, predominantly at 10 degrees.
So,
and then I still have enough to advance it or retard it without getting into the valve cover or
so right now what we're going to do is we're going to point it, we're going to put it in alignment. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take the hardware, I'm going to snug down the hold down on this. This part isn't rocket science. I don't think you can see what I'm doing, but I apologize. Basically, there's a little stud underneath here, and I'll show you a picture, and that clamp goes over it, and you just put your hardware down. Like I said, I will show that, a picture of that here pretty soon, but you're going to face number one with your rotor as close as you can. And I'm just going to snug this down finger tight for right now.
And I might add, this is actually the same procedure for all engines, whether it be a Chrysler or a Ford, a Chevrolet, makes no difference. When you put the distributor in, the ignition timing has to match the cam timing or nothing wants to run. You get that lovely backfire through the carburetor or back there through the exhaust system.
So if you look right there, all I did, there's a stud. I put the clamp down over that stud with the hardware, and that clamp holds the distributor in place. Now once this is down, you'll notice that there is no separation between the two except the gasket. If there is separation, well, then you don't have it in there right. And that's what Jimmy was just showing you as far as skipping the teeth on the gear. So now...
And sometimes, actually, when you put the distributor in, because I rotated the oil pump, sometimes I got lucky and it hit. You may have to rotate the engine again and then go back through the timing sequence to double check everything.
So now that I know that it's facing number one, now mind you, this is loose.
You can't have that yet.
We have it in alignment to number one. Be right back. All right, so what I'm going to do next, I did go ahead and just tighten that down a little bit on the clamp. One thing, if you look, everything is in alignment, facing to number one. And actually, I'm going to move that a little bit. I'm not 100% looking at it from a top view. All I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate that just a little bit so it's facing more towards number one. There we go. Locked into place. Now that's all I'm going to do. And then you're going to put the cap back on. So that's tightened down. And when you go to set the timing on this, which we're going to show when we fire this up, as Jimmy said, you rotate it. All right, so if you look, you have your mark there, your rotor facing, and we already set number one, and we have that mark. So that is all going to go back in the same location. as it came off. And as Jimmy explained, there's little tabs, and that locked down into place. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your screwdriver. It's got these little plunger locks, if you want to say, that hold it down in the base. You're going to go down, and you're going to put those in place. Now, this distributor did come out with a vacuum advanced lockout plate if you want to lock out your timing. We're not going to do that. I'm going to be doing a lot of tuning on this car, I have a feeling, once it's on and in the engine. So once you get all these locked into place, the distributor itself is held in. So what Jimmy just did was, we do need power going to this. So the HEI actual setup has 2 wires that go to this. One of them is tack and one of them is battery. There's a little harness that plugs into this, but since we have a run stand, we're making our own basically. So Jimmy is actually hooking up the power side, which is on the far side of this, to power. And then what we'll end up doing, another wire will run and we'll hook up the tack. It's a very simple hookup on these.
But please note, on a regular GM ignition like this, basically this is a copy of the original GM HEI ignition, except for Holley made it better, or MSD made it better. It's the original ones didn't have as much amperage, they didn't have as much voltage, I mean as far as spark voltage, and they just made it better. Their advanced system's better, everything's just better. They took a product that was made and made it a whole lot better.
Yep. And so this is everything's built in. So your coil's on top and your distributor here, 2 wires, you're good to go. What I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to the next step of this, as Jimmy's doing some of that wiring, I'm going to show you the next step of this, and which is actually installing the spark plugs. And I know that sounds boring, but I'm going to show you something that's kind of an important step with this. See you in a minute. All right, real quick. Spark plugs. I normally use Autolite, 3924s, 3923s, wherever the application is. We're actually going to break this in on a set of Champions. The cylinder heads that this comes with does give recommended specs for this. Always run what the cylinder head has for a recommended size and everything on there. I did do some research on this, and it calls for, with this ignition, spark plug gap at 35 thousandths. A lot of different ways you can set spark plug gap on this. You can bang it, you can do whatever. But I have this cool little tool here, and basically you place it in here, face that up like that, and you'll rotate this in, and you can turn it, and what that's going to do, it's going to close the gap on there. If you look with that spark plug gap, it'll close that. Well, each one of these needs to be done, and basically what you end up doing is, I know I need 35 thousandths. So you take a feeler gauge, set it at 35 thousandths on your blade, which is right there, and you're going to place it in there just like that. There's your 35 thousandths, and what you're going to do is you're going to turn that in there until it's, not snug but not loose. So there's your 35 thousandths. So what you're going to do is you're going to do that on every single one of them. See you in a few. All right, well, the next step of this process, since we got the distributor in, we got it in a place, locked down, and if you remember right, we knew our order of cylinders, and we wrote our firing order down on the distributor cap. So while that was a quick tip that I showed you that, is because now what we're going to do is we're going to take spark plugs, and we're going to line them up where they need to go based upon that cylinder. Now, we're going to be using an Excel super stock spiral wire, 7 and 8 millimeter silicone jacketed. These are a really good performance plug for street and strip. These work with the Excel ignition itself. the MSD Street Fire HEI ignition. So that's what we're going to use for wires. And to help kind of protect everything, what we're going to do is, these I just got off Amazon. It's just a spark plug boot to help protect that from the heat if they get close to the headers, and some of these looms. These were purchased on Amazon. You can get them pretty much anywhere you want. So yeah, that's kind of the next step, is adding these spark plug wires to where they need to go. See you in a few. All right, so a quick tip on that is what you kind of want to do, and I don't have this on camera. You want to lay out your wires longest to shortest. That way you know you're going to get them in the right spot. This is a kit that's supposedly made for a small block Chevy, but we all know how spark plug wires go. Real quick, they do have two different ends on it. If you look at that end closely, it's kind of got like a little boot style thing on there, and that one's a little bit more narrow. So this end here actually goes to the distributor. Hear that click in, and then the other end would end up going the spark plug. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to show you this and then just put it on time lapse. I'm going to find number one, and which is right here because I have it marked, and number one on the engine is over here because it's 1, 3, 5, 7, and then you're going to go 2, 4, 6, 8. So from the distributor, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to click this on. And now what I did do on this is I already pre-greased these. There's like a little electronics grease, to help these things stay dry, no contaminants, not get corroded and all that. So I did dab that in these itself with a Q-tip. I'm going to click that down. And what I'm going to do, if you look here, I do have one of these boots. I'm just going to slide that over, which is good. I should have gotten, these are a 90-degree boot, so it does make it a little bit more difficult per se. But basically, when you have your one in place, you're going to go and you're going to put it on number one. And that, you'll hear it pop. That little click. There's your number one. And you're just going to repeat that step and go from there. It's not rocket science. You just want to make sure you get it in the right order. And honestly, one of the best things to do, and I've done this quite a few times, I do a pre-check on everything. Make sure that everything is lined up accordingly and it hasn't been, one's not going to three and vice versa. So after I get it all done, I'm going to get the book out and I'm going to go through and make sure everything is correct. Because when you go to fire this up, like we're going to do here pretty soon, we want to make sure the firing order is in the correct way because we got to break in this cam and it needs to be done right. So what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm just going to put it on time lapse and I'm going to start lining up the spark plug wires where they need to go based upon the orientation on the cap that we have marked to the correct cylinders per small block Chevy specifications. With that, guys, I'm just going to throw it on time lapse. I think you get it. It's spark plugs. I'll see you in a few. Well, there you go, guys. That's how you put a distributor into a freshly built small block Chevy. It's not a really hard process. Really what you need to do is you need to do your research to find the firing order, to find how the cylinders are laid out. All that is readily available online, Chilton manuals, factory Chevy manuals, you name it. Then from there, you know what, it's adding the spark plug wires. Mind you, this is on a test run stand. They don't look pretty, but they're functional. We still don't know what headers are going to go with this car on there, but I can already tell that the plugs will be rerouted to a certain way when it's in there, and we'll probably end up running like a shorty plug, shorty header plug for the spark plugs on this when we go to install it. But like I said, this is just for the engine run stand. We put them on. It's a nice, good quality brand. Everything's out of the way. It's off the headers. And you know what, guys? We're pretty much ready to fire on this. Jimmy and I got a couple things to do, and from there, This engine's done. We're going to fire it up. We're going to break it in. We're going to make that musical automotive noise that we call horsepower, and we're going to have a whole lot of fun. Hope you learned something with that today. If not, well, watch the video again, or go check out somewhere else. But it's one of those videos. You got to be able to do this to make that horsepower, to make this thing fire and have some fun. With that, we'll see you tomorrow. Later.